"Just stand next to me," he said. "That's all I'm asking." Wesley Holt had rehearsed those words 11 times on the drive over. He'd said them in the elevator. He'd said them again in the lobby of the Meridian Center, while the charity gala hummed behind its glass doors. And the city lights of Vancouver smeared gold across the wet November pavement outside. And when Paige Conroy finally looked at him, not with warmth, not with recognition, just with the polite blankness of someone trying to place a face, he said it a third time. She tilted her head. "I'm sorry. I need you to stand next to me tonight," Wesley said. "Like we're together. Like we've been together for a while." The pause that followed was long enough that the string quartet inside started a new piece. Paige crossed her arms, not defensively, just thoughtfully, the way she did everything. He remembered that about her. He remembered more than she knew. "You're serious," she said. "I am." She looked past him through the glass. He knew what she was looking at before she said anything. Inside, in the warm amber light, a man in a charcoal suit was laughing at something a woman beside him had said. The woman was stunning in that deliberate, curated way. She wore a ring that caught the light every time she moved her hand. The man was Derek Ashmore, and tonight was his engagement party. Derek Ashmore, who had ended things with Paige Conroy 14 months ago in a parking garage, after a dinner she'd planned for their 2-year anniversary, who had told her she was wonderful, but that he needed something different, and who had been engaged to Laurel Finch Beaumont. Harris, philanthropist, perfectly positioned, within 6 months of that conversation. Paige had been invited tonight because the Meridian Center's music program fell under her professional jurisdiction as the regional director of arts programming for the city of Vancouver. She hadn't known Derek would be here. She'd told Wesley that much when they'd run into each other 40 minutes ago in the parking structure, her standing beside her car, gripping her clutch, unable to make herself walk inside. Wesley Holt had parked 2 spaces over. He was here because the gala was raising funds for the same youth music initiative his company had been quietly financing for 3 years. He hadn't expected to find Paige Conroy frozen beside a concrete pillar, but he'd recognized her immediately. He always did. "Why me?" she asked. "Because you're here," he said, "and because I think you need it as much as I need it." She looked at him again. Really looked this time, trying to figure out the angle. Wesley let her. He'd spent years learning how to look uncomplicated when his mind was anything but. "I don't even know you," she said. "Wesley Holt. My company's the primary donor for the Meridian Youth Strings program. I've sat across from you at 2 grant review meetings in the last 18 months. Something shifted in her eyes. "The technology guy. Software infrastructure," he said. "But yes, you barely said anything at those meetings." I had nothing to add. The program was already doing what it should be doing. You made sure of that. She studied him for another moment. Behind the glass, Derek Ashmore laughed again. The sound was muffled, but Wesley heard it clearly in the way Paige's jaw tightened. "Okay," she said quietly. "Just tonight." "Just tonight," he agreed. She let out a slow breath and smoothed the front of her dress. A deep green that Wesley thought suited her better than she probably realized. And then she looked at him with the particular expression of someone gathering themselves for something unpleasant. He held the door open. The room was warm and loud in the way expensive charity events always were, with the noise of people performing generosity at each other. Wesley stayed close to Paige, not touching her, just present, and he watched the room calibrate to their arrival. He'd been to enough of these events to know what his presence did. He had the kind of money now that announced itself quietly, that made people straighten slightly when he entered, that made conversations pivot in his direction. He'd never entirely made peace with it. He accepted a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray and handed one to Paige without being asked. She took it with a small glance that might have been gratitude. They talked, more than he expected. She asked him about the strings program, genuinely asked, not conversationally asked. And he told her about the junior conductor who'd come out of the initiative 3 years ago, 17 years old and now on scholarship at the Glenn Gould School in Toronto. Paige's face did something real and unguarded when he said that. She'd advocated for the funding that had kept the program running that particular year. "I didn't know he'd gotten in," she said. "His name's Theo. He wrote me a letter." Wesley paused. "Handwritten, in cursive." Paige laughed, a short, surprised sound, and for a moment she forgot to watch the room. He'd been watching the room for her. Derek Ashmore had noticed their arrival from across the hall approximately 4 minutes after they'd walked in. Wesley had clocked the exact moment. A slight hesitation in Derek's conversation, a recalibration of his gaze, and then, almost imperceptibly, the straightening of his posture, the performance of a man who was unbothered. Wesley knew the performance well. He'd been giving variations of it his entire life. "He's looking over here," Paige said quietly, her voice steady in a way that suggested she'd spent time practicing steadiness. "I know," Wesley said. "Let him." She turned toward Wesley slightly, which was the right instinct, and he adjusted accordingly so they presented the picture of two people engaged in their own world. He told her about a disaster at the Hong Kong office last spring that had required him to make 12 consecutive decisions in 90 minutes, each one dependent on the last, like a series of falling dominoes he had to stay ahead of. She told him about a city budget meeting that had devolved into a shouting match over whether a mural counted as public art or public vandalism. He wanted to remember the exact way she described it, the specificity of her language, the flash of exasperation and then amusement, but he made himself stay in the present instead. That was the discipline he'd built over many years. Stay in the present. She didn't need to know the rest yet. Maybe she never needed to know. It was Laurel Finch Beaumont who approached them first, which Wesley hadn't anticipated. He'd expected Derek to orbit them gradually, to find a reason to swing by, to do the thing men like Derek did when they needed to confirm they still mattered. But Laurel came over directly, champagne in hand, with the confidence of someone who had never seriously worried about her position in any room. She was gracious. Wesley gave her that. She introduced herself to Paige with warmth that seemed genuine, asked about the arts programming, said the work was incredibly important. Paige matched her warmth exactly and said the gala was a wonderful thing. Wesley watched Derek hover at the edge of the conversation, not quite joining, not quite leaving. "And how do you two know each other?" Laurel asked, glancing between them with an open smile. "Through the strings program," Paige said, which was true. "We've been getting to know each other better recently," Wesley added, which was true in the way that the last 40 minutes constituted recently. Laurel nodded pleasantly. Wesley noted that she didn't look at Derek when she did. That told him something about their dynamic that he filed away without comment. Then Derek stepped forward, because standing at the edge of things had a shelf life. "Paige," he said. His voice carried the particular warmth of someone who wanted to demonstrate they bore no ill will. "Derek," Paige said. "Congratulations, thank you." He extended his hand to Wesley. "Derek Ashmore, Wesley Holt." A beat. Wesley had learned a long time ago that silence in moments like this one belonged to whoever was more comfortable in it. "Holt," Derek repeated. "The software company. That's right. I've heard good things." Derek said it the way people said things when they'd heard exactly nothing, but wanted to seem informed. Wesley smiled mildly. Likewise. What followed was 2 minutes of the most efficient social pleasantry Wesley had ever participated in. Laurel guided the conversation with the skill of someone who had attended 1,000 events like this one. Derek participated. Wesley contributed minimally and precisely. Paige held herself together with a composure that he found honestly remarkable. When they moved on, Laurel drawing Derek away toward another cluster of guests. Wesley felt Paige exhale beside him. "You're good at this," she said quietly. "At what?" "Not reacting." Wesley considered the water glass in his hand. "I've had practice." She looked at him sideways. What kind of practice? He thought about what to say. He thought about 14 years of it, of learning to have a face that didn't give anything away because the thing you were feeling was too large to give away safely, because showing it wrong could do more damage than not showing it at all. The kind where the stakes were high, he said, and I was the only one who knew what they were. Paige was quiet for a moment. "That sounds lonely." "It was," he said. "It is sometimes." She looked at him again differently now. "You didn't have to do this tonight. Stop me in the parking garage. You could have just walked past." "I know. Why didn't you?" He turned his glass slowly in his hand. "I've been asking myself that." They stepped outside near the end of the event, onto the terrace where the string quartet had moved during the cocktail hour and then vacated for the November air. The rain had stopped. The city spread itself out below them, all that lit up wet glass, the inlet dark beyond the towers. Wesley stood beside Paige at the railing and looked out and did not say what he'd been not saying all evening. "Can I tell you something strange?" she said. "Yes. I feel better than I have in months." She shook her head slightly, like she was surprised by her own words. "Which doesn't make sense, because that was objectively a terrible evening. Why doesn't it make sense?" She looked at him. "Because I came here to feel terrible. I'd been bracing for it for a week. And then I spent the night talking to someone who's, she stopped. I don't know how to say this without it sounding like a slightly odd compliment. Say it anyway. Someone who seems to actually be paying attention. She smiled, a little rueful. Most people at things like this are paying attention to the room. You were paying attention to the conversation. Wesley looked out at the water. He had 14 years of practice paying attention to her specifically, but he wasn't going to say that. Not like this. You're easy to pay attention to, he said instead. You say things that are worth listening to. Paige was quiet for a moment. How have I sat across from you at 2 meetings and not noticed you were like this? You were doing your job. So was I. He paused. Also, I was being very careful. She tilted her head. Careful about what? He turned toward her then. Something in his expression must have shifted, because she looked at him differently, more carefully, the way she'd looked at him in the parking garage when she was trying to place his face. Wesley, she said slowly. Do I know you? Like, actually know you? From somewhere else? He held her gaze. What makes you ask that? I don't know. She frowned. Something about the way you. She stopped. You said you remembered me from the grant meetings. I did, but you also said you recognized me in the parking garage immediately, before I said my name. He didn't respond. I'm a regional arts director, she said. I'm not exactly recognizable. Still, Wesley said nothing. Paige stared at him. He watched the moment of it happening. The way memory works, not in a single flash but in a sequence of small unlockings, one thing pulling on another. Her eyes went somewhere else for a moment, inward, moving through something. There was a community music program, she said slowly. Not here, in Kelowna. When I was 21, I was doing my practicum, teaching piano to kids from group homes. She paused. After school, 2 days a week. Wesley's hands were very still on the railing. There was this one kid, Paige said. He didn't talk to anyone, just sat in the back and watched the first 3 sessions. And then one day he came in early and sat down at the upright piano in the corner and started playing something. Just picking it out by ear, a song he'd heard somewhere, and I asked him if he wanted to learn properly, and he said. She stopped. She looked at Wesley. He said, "What's the point?" She finished quietly. Wesley said nothing. And I told him. Her voice caught slightly. I told him that music was the one thing nobody could take from you once you learned it. That it went wherever you went, that it was yours permanently. She was watching Wesley carefully now. He was 11. He was angry about everything. He had every right to be. She swallowed. He came to every session after that, for the rest of the year. He never missed one. The city lights reflected off the water below. I moved away at the end of my practicum, Paige said. I always wondered what happened to him. Wesley turned to face her fully. He'd been carrying this for so long that he'd stopped thinking about what it would feel like to put it down. He'd built it into the architecture of himself. That year in Kelowna, that room, that piano, that woman who'd said music was yours permanently, and he'd built everything else around it. Every decision, every late night, every company, every quiet donation to every music program he could find, and he'd never let himself think too directly about why. The strings program at the Meridian Center, he said. The youth initiative. The 3 others I fund in the lower mainland. The one in Kelowna that became the model for the rest. He paused. That's what happened to him. Paige's expression was something he didn't have a word for. You were 11, she said. 11 and a half, he said. I was very precise about that. She let out a long breath. It wasn't quite a laugh, and it wasn't quite a cry, and it seemed to encompass both. Wesley, I know. This whole evening. I know. You knew who I was in the parking garage. Yes. You've known this entire time. Yes. She turned away from him toward the water and was quiet for a long moment. He let her be quiet. He'd learned that from her, actually. The particular patience of letting someone finish a thought before you tried to help with it. Why didn't you say something, she asked. The grant meetings. Too tight? I didn't know how. He considered the railing under his hands. You gave something to a very angry 11-year-old that he didn't know what to do with. He built his whole life around it without ever finding the right way to say thank you. And then he kept finding reasons to delay because it felt too large and too strange, and he didn't want to make it uncomfortable for you. He paused. And then tonight I found you in a parking garage, and you couldn't make yourself walk through a door, and I thought. You thought. What? I thought that maybe the timing had been waiting for both of us. He looked at her profile in the light. That maybe the right moment wasn't one I was going to manufacture. It was one I had to recognize. Paige turned back to look at him. Her eyes were bright in the way that had nothing to do with tears, or maybe everything to do with them. "I remember you," she said softly. "I remember your face. You were so angry. I was, and so careful not to show it. Yes, I remember thinking you were carrying something much too heavy for someone your age." Her voice was very quiet. "I used to hope you'd put it down eventually." "I did," he said, "mostly." A pause. The music helped. She nodded slowly. They stood there while the city hummed below them and the terrace lights cast their long shadows, and somewhere inside the event wound down. "Wesley," she said finally. "The boy I knew, would he have any idea what to do with this situation right now?" "No," Wesley said. "He was terrible at this kind of thing." "Are you better?" "Marginally." He looked at her. "I'm working on it." She looked at him for a long moment, measuring something. He didn't know what she'd find. He'd spent a long time not knowing if the thing he'd carried was something worth finding. "There's a small concert," Paige said. 2 weeks from now. Chamber music at the Orpheum. One of the students from the Meridian program is performing. She's 16. She's extraordinary. She plays Bartok like she's been doing it for 50 years. She paused. "I was going to go alone." "Were you?" he said. "I've decided not to," she said. "Go alone." Wesley looked at her. He'd spent a long time recognizing moments. The discipline of it, the patience of it, the practice of knowing when something was real and when you were just hoping it was. This was real. "I'd like that," he said. The night settled around them, clear and cold and entirely theirs.